Okay, so this is the final shir, which should ostensibly mean, since it's the final shir, that means we're supposed to be getting all our answers. Okay? And you will leave with an answer to the question. But the question is whether the answer is could be consistent with the richness of the question that we set forth to ourselves, which wasn't just Nachash Tikotayr. We're trying to get something that actually speaks from Mineu Bay and the reality, and that I think originally the plan was to have 6 shurim. Today's the 5th one. I think the missing one is going to show up in the fact that I'll give you the Torah, and whether this corresponds and maps onto the world as we know it or to our lives, we'll have to wait for whenever, because we're ending tonight. Okay, so the question we ended last time, to pick up exactly where we ended, it goes like this. Once upon a time, there were Nevi'im, and the Nevi'im understood the world in moral terms. There's one basic thing that the Nevi'im did, which is the Medrash, Gadol Koichem Shel Nevi'im Shemedamim Tzura Liyotzer. What is the great power of the Nevi'im? That they anthropomorphize Hashem, that they talk of Hashem as a human, which means that they understood Hashem and His actions, which is the universe, in moral terms. Which, in other words, they understood that if you wanted to know the depths, the deepest explanation of what's going on, the most fundamental explanation of reality is to explain things in terms of morals, and those same morals that a tzaddik would have. Which tzaddik? The Nevi'im. So that's how the Nevi'im are in tune with what's happening. Because God acts as the great men would. Or another way to say that is that the moral of the great man is the blueprint of the universe. Blueprint of history. So that's what the Nevi'im said. The Nevi'im said, you want to understand Hashem? Let's talk about Hashem as someone who's just be careful not to touch this because it's sensitive. No, let's do that. Yeah, okay. So that's what the Nevi'im said. Okay, fine. So once upon a time, the world made sense as a human organism. Meaning, you could look at the world and think of it as a great tzaddik. Same way, if Hashem would be a great tzaddik, here's what He would do. So that's pshat in the whole of history. That's what the Nevi'im said. Then along came a time, brings us up to, let's say, the end of Nevuah, when, as we discussed last year, humans started to learn that actually the universe can be impersonal. And as we discussed last time, that has to do with the recognition of universals. Universals means laws of science, which the laws of science, the laws of science as we call science, in other words, physics, etc., not using morality as a law of science, as we discussed last year, that it could be a law of science. But if you don't consider morality as a law of science, you think of the other laws of science, the laws of physics, and you say everything that happens is because of impersonal laws. Impersonal. Which means that the universe, or Hashem, more importantly, is impersonal. Okay? So impersonal means you can't explain everything by thinking of Hashem as a person, because it doesn't work, it doesn't add up. To state it very clearly, things happen that good people wouldn't do. Okay? Another thing that's called is something we spoke about, I think, maybe the first, second year, Tzaddik Barala. Tzaddik Barala, as the Gemara Bracha says, there's two Mahalchim in the world. There's a Mahalch Tzaddik B'Toivloi, Mahalch Tzaddik Barala. Mahalch Tzaddik B'Toivloi is where Hashem is doing what we think He should do, as in He's acting as a person would. And Tzaddik Barala is where things happen that a person wouldn't do. So basically, in other words, the two things we see in reality, two things in the universe, you could explain certain things, you think certain things are moral, certain things we point to and we say, oh, Hashem is good. Hashem is good because X, Y, Z. And then all sorts of terrible things happen and we don't say Hashem is bad, we say we don't understand. Which basically means that there are really two conflicting realities. And the Gemara in Brachas, as I mentioned once, Moshe Rabbeinu's kasha on HaKadosh Baruch Hu, b'Rimash tzaddik v'tov tzaddik v'raloi, is not why isn't Hashem always tov? Because why does Hashem have to be understood? His kasha is what why are there two paths? Why is Hashem sometimes make himself understood and sometimes not? Meaning, if Hashem's not always understood, so let's throw out the whole business of talking about how good Hashem is, and let's stop anthropomorphizing when we can, right? Sometimes we can say, oh, Hashem is good, and we understand Hashem. But if we don't always understand Hashem, so we should be done. There has to be a mahalach of why sometimes yes, sometimes not. Okay? So in a certain sense, that's what we're talking about. Because let me explain what we're talking about. We're talking about really two of the same thing. Up to a certain point, there was nevuah, i.e., it was a tkufa of giloi, of his galus, where Hashem was understood. And the Rebbe could talk about Hashem as a human, and that's the most fundamental explanation of the universe. And then we came to a time where that no longer worked as an explanation. Okay? What changed? Which came first? That was last year. We'll talk about that. It no longer worked as an explanation. It's to talk about things as being good morally. So now we're in a tkufa, post-nevuah tkufa is a tkufa called tzaddik or alay. And then the question that we are set for ourselves is to figure out, now that we're in a universalistic world, which now we know what that means a little better. It means that we don't see Hashem as acting towards us as a human. We recognize that there's a whole universe out there with its own impersonal laws. So the question is, will there ever be this relationship? Will there ever once in the future be a relationship with Hashem similar to that first relationship? Because the first relationship with Hashem was, Hashem does to us as we deserve. And that's Yitzchak Mitzrayim. Yitzchak Mitzrayim is when the good guys win, the bad guys lose, and Klal Yisrael gets what they deserve. And therefore they are Das Hashem. Das Hashem means understanding, recognizing Hashem as a person, the greatest person, who does the greatest things. And then we reach this kufa of not having das, where things don't make sense. Okay, that's the world up till now. And the question is, if we're supposed to assume that the day will come when or maybe the day has come, where Klal Yisrael has an haga of tzaddik v'toivloi, of where they start knowing Hashem as a person. So, and therefore, and then we say, oh, Klal Yisrael has a unique relationship with Hashem, because as we discussed, what happens to Klal Yisrael is the way Hashem reveals His personality. If that's going to happen again, right? We could always just say, okay, that's going to happen again. It's going to happen again. But yet, the problem we set forth for ourselves is l'chayra, something has changed. It is a universal world. We're not just going to go back to Yisrael and have our private Hashem, and we talk and know that from the Nevi'im. So, and also, b'chlal, we'll stop turning back the clock. The whole story of history is geula, galus, and just go back to the way it used to be. What does the interim stage contribute to the last stage? So it's really all the same question. Is how does tzaddik v'ralei contribute to tzaddik v'toivloi? How do those two things work together? How are this interim stage of galus, or universalism, where Klal Yisrael mixes the nations, where we discover that there's universal laws that are hold on everyone, where we're faced with the fact that we're not the only ones who have an experience of God, other people have their own experiences, and somehow we have to incorporate that into some Das Hashem. How will all those things come together in the future? That's the question. Yeah.
started being a
No, it's certainly not. I would say it's a tkufa of tzaddik v'ralei. It's a tkufa where tzaddik v'ralei is the most powerful in the way people think about Hashem. In other words, I think that's probably, there's an answer to Moshe Rabbeinu's kasha, right? The answer is, as Gemara says, tzaddik gomer, tzaddik she'ena gomer. So that means the tkufa of nevuah is a tkufa where it's tzaddik and gemurim. There is such a thing as tzaddik and gemurim, or as tzidkut's gemurim. Tkufa after that is a tkufa where that's very rare, if it exists at all. That's basically. Okay, that's that. So now the question is like this. So another way to ask a stira is say like this: is Hashem human or not? Is Hashem human-like or not? Right? Because that's essentially what we're saying. On one hand, Hashem acted like a human for a long time, 1,000 years exactly, by the way, to be precise. The Tkufa Nevuah was 1,000 years. Nissim Gaon says in Emunah Rama, Sefer Kabbalah, that it was from 2448 to 3448. It's Tkufa Nevuah. 1,000 years from Yitzchak Mitzrayim. And by the way, that's called the Tkufa Nevuah. I don't know if we mentioned. Why is that called the Tkufa Nevuah? There was Nevuah before that too. But that's the Tkufa of Das Hashem. That's the Tkufa where Hashem is acting in a way that makes sense. He's Mizgala. That's Yitzchak Mitzrayim. Ani Hashem, Yidatam ki Ani Hashem. Now everything's going to make sense. You're going to understand Hashem's personality. It starts from Yitzchak Mitzrayim and goes for 1,000 years. Okay. So is Hashem like a human or is He not? Okay. Now let me be clear. I'm not asking deep metaphysical questions, philosophical questions about the nature of God. I'm really asking the way he's misnagged to us, with anhaga, or the way he's misgala. Does he care to be misgala as a human? Does he care to act like a human or not? The answer is that some kufri did, some kufri didn't. Okay. Well, why is that? Right? We're staying the same question again and again, but I want to ask it this way. Is Hashem a human or not? And there's really another steer about that. There's a steer that goes like this. Micha meicha bal gevuris umidai melech. Right? Midai melech. So it says explicitly in that bracha that no one is like Hashem. It's psukim, of course. But there's also a pasuk, Nasa Adam b'tzalmeinu kidmuseinu, which means that Adam is doime to Hashem. Steer. Nasa Adam b'tzalmeinu kidmuseinu, that means there is a dimin, there is something that's doime to Hashem, and that's the human, which is, again means Hashem acts like a human. And then we also say that midai melech.
So me, not ma.
What?
Me Melech, not
Okay.
Melech.
Well, me is no person, right? And Nasa Adam.
It's not Melech. I mean, we think that me refers to already personality.
Right, but Nasa Adam b'tzalmeinu. By the way, Nasa.
Me Melech is not the opposite or the.
It is the exact opposite, because Nasa Adam means we're going to make a person, and that person is going to be diamond to me.
Right, and me means which person.
So which one? Okay, so who's Nasa Adam? By the way, Nasa Adam, the Medrash says,
So
maybe it's okay.
Okay.
What?
No, if God would be a person, then if that pasuk is supposed to assert the non-personhood of God,
The Midayim.
say you're
Right.
Melech.
No, why? Midayim. There is no
What should be
person.
compared to you?
No, there is no person. There is no person that's like you.
Right, meaning in the range of persons.
Okay, well, which person is Kidmuseinu? Which person?
That's what I'm saying. But that,
So, by the way, I'll tell you which person. It's very interesting. It didn't tell you which person. Nasa Adam says I think the Rekeh, or the Medrash, Nun is 50, and Asay is Shloimeh. So Shloimeh reached the 50th Shar of Bina, which is alluded to in the Gemara of Rosh Hashanah. The Moshe Rabbeinu was not masking the 50th Shar, and then the Gemara goes and talking about Shloimeh Melech trying to supersede Moshe, which the Rekeh learns. It means that Shloimeh reached the 50th Shar of Bina. So Nun Asay means that one day is going to be Shloimeh, Gematria Asay, who's going to reach Nun, and he's going to be Daimet Hashem because it says Vayeshev Shloimeh al Kisei Hashem. Okay, and me is Gematria 50, and me is Bina. So really, me Daim Melech can be read as a positive statement, right? if only someone would have reached Bina, he'd be Daimet Hashem. And there's a big truth to that because okay, this is not important for linear name. It's not important. But you're talking about there's no person, it's Shloimeh, and he's the 50. He's me. And that's the steer I want to ask. So the answer is like this. The answer is that very simple. And the very simple answer to this steer. That means in the second bracha Shemoneh Esreh we talk about Hashem's gevura. It's very important. We get to this bracha a lot tonight. The bracha goes like this. The bracha talks about all the goods that Hashem does after suffering. The side of the bracha is with Tchias HaMesim. And along with Tchias HaMesim, the bracha talks about Mati Asurim, Semech Neifim, Zekiv Kufim, Be'efei Cholim. So all these things that there's a negative thing that then is redeemed or delivered, right? A delivery. And that's typified by Tchias HaMesim, which is the ikar, the content of the bracha. And the bracha is called Gevuros, it's Ata Gibar. And it corresponds to Yitzchak. That bracha goes like this. So no one is like Hashem because Hashem kills and brings back to life. So it's very simple. When Hashem is creating man, Nasa Adam, Hashem as creative, Hashem as creator, who affirms that man should exist by creating man, is very much human-like. Because what makes a human, what's the core essence of a human's morality? All your morality is rooted in the fact that you exist. You exist, so therefore you take it as a given that you should exist, and all your values, your value system basically revolves around taking your own existence as a premise. I think that's it for Yanach. Shmuley, would you be masking to that? Roughly?
Suicide is the only real philosophical
problem. Right, exactly, right. So that means that as long as you accept your own existence as given in a deep way, you don't mean given as like, well, if I exist, I should exist, and then around that is woven a whole ideal of morality. So when Hashem is created, what?
You explain that wrong.
The basis of our values, what we choose to value, is that which is most like ourselves, because we know ourselves immediately. and we somehow, this is very important, somehow tend to, due to the fact that we experience ourselves so immediately, we tend to start believing in the rightness of our existence. Does it make sense? Does this? Because to me this is pashut. No, right? No, I'm just talking experientially. This is what happens. No, that we think we should exist. Why? Because we feel our existence. Pashut, we feel it. We feel it in a way that's very immediate. And then we copy that and say, oh, someone else also feels that way. I'm not the only one who feels that you feel that way about yourself. But everything about our values starts from.
Right.
So you have a strong aloch sani, which is your being, your essence, and you defend your essence. And you build a world. You build a world around your essence, around the understanding of it.
The easier way of putting it is, how would you know what's bad and good for other people? Is because you recognize what's bad and good for yourself, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, how do I know? Maybe you like to be smacked in the face.
Right.
I tried it once and it didn't feel good, so I'm not going to try it on anyone else.
Right. But I'm saying a deeper thing. How do you get to the judgment of bad? Because of pain. Because you suffer pain, and somehow that transfers to a moral judgment of bad.
Descartes wants us to feel this way for sure.
Okay, this is how it happens. I think. Okay, we have to be in this deeper. So therefore, when Hashem creates man, when Hashem is creating man, when Hashem says Nasa Adam, He's being the most human possible, because He believes I should exist, and I believe I should exist, and that we could agree about that. In the bracha that talks about Hashem being Memes, and then Mechaya, Mapil, and then Soimich, Machli, and then we'll get to this next stage. That's very important. From that perspective, it's Midai Malach, because God kills people. Which again, you see what I just did over here. I hope no one's getting frustrated, because I really just did is I restated the whole problem, which is that there are things Hashem does that make Him human-like, and I think Hashem doesn't make Him not human-like. What makes Hashem human-like? Life. And what makes Him not human? Death. People die. I wouldn't kill someone. Hashem kills people all the time. Right? So, from that perspective, we say Midai Malach. Okay, but now the question is, but now we have a place to look at. The second bracha Shemoneh Esreh is where we talk about Hashem being not understandable. Let's say, okay? Nothing that we could compare to, nothing that we can fit into any box. Okay, so let's talk about the second bracha. What I want to tell you is like this: that the second bracha corresponds to Yitzchak, as I mentioned. And the first bracha corresponds to Avram, the second bracha corresponds to, third bracha corresponds to Yaakov, and hence we get Godel, Gibar, and Noira corresponds to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Godel is the first bracha maker, Gibar and Noira, the third bracha is Kodesh and Noira go together, and that corresponds to Yaakov. Okay. So Godel, Gibar, and Noira are the three midas of Hashem under which you can include everything. And these correspond to Avram and Yaakov. What does it mean it corresponds to? What does that mean? It means Avram's story, his focus and what he did reveals that aspect of Hashem. Yitzchak reveals Gibar, and Yaakov reveals Noir. Now, Yitzchak revealing Gibar, let's talk about that. Yitzchak reveals Gibar. Yitzchak is the one who has to die for Hashem. And Yitzchak comes back to life in the Pirkei Belezer, and he opens his eyes and says, Baruch atah Hashem Echai Amazing. Pirkei Belezer goes to the bracha Shemoneh Esreh. But Yitzchak stands for this idea that God can kill people if he so wishes. And that makes God Gibar. But there's a story after that. There's a sequel, which is that people come back to life. Okay, and that's very important. Now, we'll explain why. So here we have, Yitzchak stands for the not understandable Hashem. Yeah? And Avram and Yaakov stand for Hashem, who's Godel and Noir, which is very understandable. First bracha is very nice. Godel Chazal Chayvim, and Hashem is Kodesh. Fine, that's good. What the problem is, the problem that we have with Hashem is the middle bracha, is the fact that Hashem kills us. And this problem that we have with Hashem is, how does that fit into, this is the struggle, this is what we're working out, this is what we're trying to work out. How does the Hashem being impersonal, how does it fit in to a personal God? Does it contribute? Does it come together? Does it ever come together? Right? Does it ever come together? This same kasha does ever come together is there in Bereshis, where Avram Avinu tried to kill Yitzchak. I know no one likes when I say that. Okay, fine. We could say he was going to shech Yitzchak, and Yitzchak didn't love Yaakov. Or preferred Esau. This is what's happening there, because Yitzchak doesn't fit in. Yitzchak doesn't fit in means what Yitzchak stands for. The Metzias, it's a fact. It's a fact that in reality, there's things that we cannot personalize, we can't anthropomorphize, things about Hashem that we can't make human-like. And by the way, that's also why Hashem said to Avram, Ani Hashem, and Hashem said to Yaakov, Ani Hashem. Hashem did not say to Yitzchak, Ani Hashem. Because Ani Hashem means, like a friend, introduce himself to you. Ani Hashem, get to know me. Here I am. Yitzchak can't know Hashem in the same way that Avram and Yaakov could. But Avram and Yaakov, Ani Hashem is about Das Hashem, and Avram responds B'mo'eda, and Yaakov says it's about Das Hashem. Yitzchak can't have Das Hashem. You can't have Das Hashem and Bakiba. It's an oxymoron. It's an oxymoron to have Das Hashem and Bakiba, because Das Hashem means, I know him so well. What do I know? That he'll kill me. That I don't have to exist. So what? So there's nothing left to know. There's no thinking. There's no thinking being, because as far as that, the Midah of Hashem means that I don't have to exist. So what do you know? What's your basis for anything? You don't know anything. This is the problem Yitzchak poses. And this is why there's this tension in the Ovis. Where does Yitzchak fit in? And this is what has to be solved. And this is what the pasuk means. And the Malachi, it says, Eliyahu is going to come.
Very much at all.
Who doesn't?
Torah.
Right. No, the Nevi'im come out never. The Nevi'im come out never. Very important.
If the Nevi'im do talk about it, there's always sandwiched between Yaakov and Avram.
Well, that's where it would be, but yeah. But you don't talk about him independently, right? No, right. Yishai talks about Yaakov, Yisrael all the time, Avram also, right, of course, right. Right. Now, you know where Yitzchak is? He's in Malachi. It's all Burmazim, but Malachi contains the key to redemption and to putting it all back together. But I'm going to talk about the last pasuk Malachi. The last pasuk Malachi says that Eliyahu is going to come and be Meishiv Leivavas Albonim and Livon Malavosam. By the way, how do I know Malachi is all about Yitzchak? Because if you know the beginning of Malachi, it's Ahavti Eschem Amar Hashem. And you say, do you love? Because Yaakov and Esav are brothers, and I loved Yaakov, not Esav. It's going back to the Yitzchak story, and then it gets into Karbonis, which is Yitzchak is a carbon, and Yitzchak told Yaakov to bring him food, and talks about Ben Yichabedov. It's all about Yaakov and Esav. It's redoing the Yitzchak. It's an amazing thing. I talk about that in my sefer, my first sefer, Yaakov. But this piece is not anyway. This is the most very important piece. That Eliyahu Navi is going to Meishiv Leivavas Alban Leivon Malavoisa means he's going to make peace between Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Okay, this is what I said, and then I realized the first Gemara.
Are there any distinguishing elements between Avram and Yaakov in this scheme?
Are there? There certainly are, but I can't tell you all regalachs what they are, and it's not important for us. Suffice to say that they both stand for positive elements that can be anthropomorphized, while Yitzchak stands for the God that cannot be anthropomorphized.
So I guess the general thing that I was at least
told... Was that Yaakov puts it back together. That is, okay, fine. Fine. Good. Say it. What? Yeah, you're right. No, that Gemara. If I had more time, no. Gemara B'Metzia. You're talking about who's going to save us, Lasad Lava. Right. Is that Gemara? Right. Yeah, that's a very important Gemara. Yeah. I'm talking about the Gemara in B'Metzia. Gemara B'Metzia goes like this. I forgot which daf it is, but the story is like this. Eliyahu Hashchiach Musif to the Rebbe. Eliyahu used to come to Rebbe's Bis Medrash, and one day he comes late, and Rebbe tells him, "What happened? Why are you late?" He says like this, he says, I wake up after Avinu, I wash his hands, he davens, I put him back to bed. And then I do the same thing for Yitzchak. I say, yeah. And so Rebbe says, why don't you do it all at the same time? Save some time, come to Shiva on time, you come late. So he says, no. He says, if the three of them are davening at the same time, then that means Mashiach's going to come and it's not time for it yet. Okay. So right over there, that's that Gemara. That the role of Eliyahu Navi is to, when it's time for Mashiach, we're going to have Avram and Yaakov getting along, davening together. Davening together means Golo, Gibra, and Noira are going to actually make sense. You're actually going to be able to daven these three things which really conflict with each other. Because Hashem as a Gadol, how do you make Hashem as a Gibar? It means Hashem is not human, impersonal. How does it work together with him with this idea that he's personal? Okay. And then the Gemara continues with Mashma the Gemara because it's also relevant. So Rebbe says, "Does anyone like that?" And this really says, "Yeah, Pchiu Banov. Pchiu Banov are like Avram and Yaakov." So Rebbe calls it Tainus, and he makes them the Bali Tefillah. Says the Gemara, they said Mashav Ruach, and the wind started to blow. They said Mer Geshem, and the rain started to fall. Kimatu L'Meimer L'Chayim Eisim, the world started to shake. And in heaven they sent Eliyahu Navi to break this thing up. He was Megala. So what do you see from that Gemara? is that Elyonavi's role is to unite Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and that it's all about the bracha of At Gibor. At Gibor is what we have to. No one ever really davened At Gibor, right? Every single day for the last thousands of years, we're saying Mechayim Mesim. It never happened yet. So that's what we have to. We have to fit in At Gibor to the klolos of Mahan Hagav Hashem, and then we're going to reach Tchis HaMesim. I mean, because At Gibor here, I'm telling you, Gibor is all about how Hashem is anti-humans, but then, as I said, there's a sequel. Then he brings us back from the dead. Oh, so the chayr. So in other words, think about it like this. Let's just schematically, and then we'll think what the lumbus is. How do we reconcile the God who has a personality with the one who destroys? Well, if the destruction is followed with a resurrection, if death is followed by life, then that has something to do with the answer, right? That even the Hashem as being, let's call it destructive, Hashem who kills, that itself somehow leads to life. Chiddush Gadol. All the evils we see, all the death we see for thousands of years, which we mourn, and every time we see it, we say, Midai Malach, Malach Meimes, we can't understand Hashem, we don't understand Hashem. There's an answer. That it's going to somehow turn back into life.
Could Hashem kill people on Shabbos then?
Why? What's the kind?
Just Kilko, then you're fine.
Bishlam, it's Kilko. Yeah. That's Makakal Masazakin here. What?
Right, so that's what I'm saying. If I'm not a sakin, then you have a problem.
Right. Okay, you're asking. Yeah, there's another question. Yeah, no. No, there is a very important question, by the way, which is that. No, there's a very, very important question which has to do with this. No, there's a very important question which has to do with this whole shmooze, which is, why do we mourn death? If we believe in Tchis HaMesim, say that, why are we so busy with death? Right? So it's not.
That has a whole different shot than why we mourn death. It's not because we're sad. It's going to mark the passing of the person.
Which Rambam do you mean?
Saying I'm not them.
Yeah.
I'm saying it's whatever. It says that if you have any Meisha in the Misnachman, right? You get a tzibur. Why?
Yeah.
You should have a person leave the world and no one knows.
I hear. The fact is,
but also like a Mitzayra, you bring him back. The more
no, but the fact is, I'm saying is like this. The fact is, if Tchis HaMesim, if we believed in Tchis HaMesim, we're related to Tchis HaMesim, the same way we relate to things that happen all the time, then we would react differently to death. No? I think so. So is that inconsistent? Are we inconsistent? But the answer is no, we're not, because Tchis HaMesim, I mean, without going into this whole thing, but it has to do with the shmuz over here, that Tchis HaMesim is not built in to the world as we know it. Tchis HaMesim is after we accept that God is impersonal, which is what Yitzchak stands for, go shech Yitzchak, let him die, kacha. Then there's a story. There's a new story that happens afterwards.
Why is that?
Because again, we have to explain. I'll explain why I'm almost giving you the answer, okay? To the extent that we can discuss it tonight. But I'm just telling you the scheme. Be'etzem, Hashem is impersonal. Hashem does impersonal things, which means people should die. If they die, they should stay dead. Right? But, says Eliyahu Navi, we can actually work out Hashem being impersonal, make sense out of that in a way that it works together with the good God, which I only Yaakov stand for. And when we do that, then it's going to lead to a good. Okay? Meaning to say, so the answer to the question is, Tchis HaMesim is not supposed to happen naturally. It's not built into the world. It only happens, on the contrary, what's built into the world is Yitzchak, is the fact that there's things that are impersonal. That's part of Hashem's plan, part of Hashem's anhaga is that he should act personally and should also act impersonally. Now, when you accept that impersonalness, accept it, be Yitzchak, be willing to sacrifice yourself, midai malach, and that will result in some resolution, which we're about to say, I think, what it is. And with that resolution, Hashem becomes Gadol, Gibor, and Noir in a way that makes sense. And how does it make sense? It makes sense through Tchis HaMesim. Okay, now let me explain exactly what that means. What does it mean it makes sense through Tchis HaMesim? Well, how do we make sense? So how do we make sense? Now I'm finally going to give you the answer. How do we make sense how do we reconcile between Hashem being human-like and Hashem not being human? So as I said before, humans take their values from their own existence, right? We exist and therefore we, what's the word I'm looking for? Like to portray it. No, but to send it out. Project, thank you. We project our own being and the value that we attribute to that because we feel our own being we project that out onto the world, and then we understand the world in those terms. That's human nature. Now, that's all very good. The problem is that our being itself, our existence, is contingent. Meaning, contingent means totally. It's afshari, it's possible. It's not. We don't have to exist. We happen to exist. We don't have to exist. Proof is people die. So that's the certain flaw in our understanding. In other words, what are we looking to build? Let's say when we talk about we're looking to build Das Hashem. What that means is we're looking to build an understanding of the world, a true understanding of the world. That's what it means. Now, our understanding of the world that we're looking to build is based on ourselves, taking ourselves and projecting that. Okay? The thing with ourselves is that we feel like we have to exist because we don't remember not existing. But one day we're not going to exist. Right? So, I mean, here's another way to say it. People ask, like, the Rambam says after Tchias HaMesim people are going to die again. And people want to know, like, so why do you come back to life? And I never understood that question because a life that you live after you have died once, it's going to be a very different kind of life. You're going to have a different idea of some of you are going to do much more important things. You're going to be focused on the right things, right? So basically, it's imagine if we remember not existing, which is probably impossible, whatever. But imagine we remember not existing. So we could exist, we could exist in time and space, and at the same time be aware of the fact that it's all contingent. It's all kacha. You can call it rotzen. Rambam talks about Hashem does things b'chacham and Hashem does things b'rotzen. Hashem does things because he wants to. Right? So wants to meaning he didn't have to do it. Now we exist and we tend to think that we must exist. So in other words, we tend to think that what's the greatest value? Our existence as a necessity. As a necessity, it must be so. But that's not true. That's a trick. That's a delusion that we have because we exist and it's very difficult for someone that exists. I think the most difficult thing for something that exists is to recognize the possibility, the real possibility of his non-existence and accept it as a real possibility in being. But if you would do that, let's say you accept that you exist despite the fact that it's very, very possible and completely okay for you not to exist. What that's going to do is that's going to change your whole value system. You see? This is the answer. The solution between Gibor, the resolution between Hashem being impersonal, Hashem being personal, between Gibor and Gadol HaNoira is, yes, the human is the name is the true of the universe, is the story of history, is a human being. Yes, Hashem is personal. But what does it mean to be a person? What does it mean to be a person? People are there by the Ratzon of God, by the grace of God. So what it means to be a person it means to be an existent which is contingent, which is there because it is, even though it didn't have to be. So you can look at it, you can say it's a gift, it's not necessary. You could say there's an arbitrariness. But what I'm trying to bring you to understand is think about yourself and the way you take yourself for granted. And because you take yourself for granted, you think you're the center of the universe and everything has to evolve around you. And that's all true and that's human nature. But think about what if you would actually really accept that two things. That you could possibly not exist, really, and that's fine. And that despite that you exist. That's what's meant, that's the concept of Malachi Mason. That's Tchias HaMesim. That even after the person dies, so you learned the lesson. Dying has got to be quite life-altering, whatever the word is going to be. Right? Okay? It changes, gives you a different perspective. And then he comes back to life. So his concept of a human being, what we call it, Tzuras Adam, how he thinks of what it is to be human, is now influenced by his non-existence. So his being, his very being, his personality now is a different personality. His personhood, his personness, how does he think about being a person? He thinks about it with a strong flavor of rotzen, meaning to say it is because Hashem wills it, not because it has to be. So we have, this is sort of a hybrid of, on the one hand, taking personness as the most basic feature of the world and projecting your personness onto the world, but also at the same time being aware of the fact that this personness, which is all we've got, it's not all we've got, but it's something that has been given and is not something that must be. So in other words, it must be because it was willed. Let's say. Is it making sense to anyone? To everyone? That's the basic idea. So again, it's really very simple. It's really very simple. The simple idea is as follows. Whether it's true or not is the question, but the idea itself is actually pretty simple. Like I said, we tend to take ourselves as the center of reality. If you know what I mean by that, I think that makes sense. I mean, it's our experience. We take ourselves as being very important, and based on that, we decide what else is important because we assume we are important, and we take ourselves for granted. As in we sort of course, we all know we might die. I'm not saying that, but we feel that we're supposed to be. Varai we are. And then what do I say? You know what? No, you know what? You're not supposed to be, but you are nonetheless. It's just something in between. The personhood is, in a certain sense, that means that whole personhood is like a mirage. It's not so essential to reality as we thought it was, right? It's something that's, you could say, it's like superimposed on reality. God took reality and he put personhood on it. It doesn't have to be there. And it's very important because what it means also is, and this is getting very deep, and I want to go into this, but it means that when we think of Hashem as a person, depending what a person is, of course, it depends how we think about Hashem. So that's why it's very important. So in other words, this detour that history takes into Hashem being impersonal contributes to how we think about Hashem.
I have a side question.
Yeah.
I
love quests. Let's go.
I'm
on a bunch of them already, though.
Does this analysis, how I'm putting this question together properly, does this analysis of a person being the way a person is that accidental or a contingent fact that people are the way they are? And then I guess the follow-up question for that is God... Are the way they are in what sense? In what way? Are the way they are because of a contingency or because of a necessity? No, in which way? They are in what way? They are... You say they are the way that God would be like them, is really my question. They are in the way that God... Is God contingently like people because people are contingently like people? Meaning if there would be a human of a different kind, would the God of these humans then be possibly different? Yeah, probably, I would imagine. So, but this is assuming that the people are the way they are because of a contingency and not because of a necessity. If people are necessarily the way they are because God is the way God is, then God being like people is because God is the way He is. Well, God made people the way He chose to make them. So I'm not sure what you mean by that. So I'm saying, did God make people because He chose to as like an act of like brute will, or is it a product of God's intelligence? So that's the point. That's exactly what we're getting at. That Chias HaMesim says we have to think about God's will too. We can't only think about His Chachma. The Rambam is a dichotomy between God's will and His Chachma. Right. It's two aspects. When we talk about God's will, we mean something that we can't explain and we just accept as it's the way it is. Chafetz. And that's what I mean by contingent. So that's what Chias HaMesim teaches us. Even the way Rambam speaks about Chachma, he couples these terms also, like kachatz or chachmaseh, right? Yeah, because even his chachma is beyond language of necessity. It's a different kind of language of necessity, right? Meaning, but that's an element of necessity there, and chachma is an element of necessity. Right. I always felt like that lashon has a sort of chaotic, still randomness to it. Like, yeah, because Rambam insists that his chachma is beyond our understanding. Can we get some water here? I mean, there's that too. So he sort of, even when he talks about Chachma, thank you, he doesn't say, I can tell you why God did it. But there can be a different kind of person, is what I'm trying to ask. Like, our existence as contingent people. All this is Chachmasai. Everything I'm describing is Nichnas into Chachmasai. Right, but I'm saying is this, when we speak about God being like humans, it's being like the godly human that exists because Chutzur Chachmasai, not because Kachei Chavetz. Meaning, are we the way we are because of Kachei Chavetz or because I don't understand the question. I think I want to leave the question. Okay. It's too complicated. I wasn't sure if I answered it correctly. It doesn't seem like it worked.
Is this way of understanding possible without this experience or lack of experience of death?
I don't think so. I think that my basic assumption here is that, at least on the human-wide level, at least on the human, I'm talking about humanity now as a whole, because I'm talking about history. History has to go through certain stages of humans experiencing God being impersonal. And of course, annihilation is very important for this. The Jews' suffering is very important for God's plan. It's basically Yitzchak.
So like Eliyahu Navi understands this. This is what.
Eliyahu Navi is going to initiate.
He understands this maybe because if he's dead and alive.
Oh, interesting. Right. And for an individual, I think for an individual too, that yes, I think that it can't be understood until the person undergoes death and resurrection. And when we mean understood, though, we don't mean what's really important. We don't mean philosophically, right? We mean that this becomes his persona. This becomes a human's Das Hashem, which Yirmiyah says, what's Das Hashem? Action. Don dinani ve'evyon oz toivloi haloi hi hadas oisino Hashem. So that's thank you. Das Hashem reflects in action, Yirmiyah says, which means that when we talk about Das Hashem, it doesn't mean just something that you can explain. It means something that is reflected on your deepest level of your own personality, such that it's reflected in how you live. So what I'm positing is that this kind of human being, the human being who went through death and came back to life, is going to have a different Das Hashem that no one else can have unless he actually has that experience. Or knows someone that went through that, I don't know, whatever, But that it's necessary that it happen. Because Lamaisa, we can only talk about things theoretically. It's science fiction for us. It won't change us until it happens to us. It won't make us different people. And it won't give us a different Das Hashem until it actually happens. Okay, so this is a solution we've been trying to get at the whole time, B'atzem in one way, in one aspect, and then we're going to talk about another aspect. The one aspect we're trying to get at is, okay, Hashem was once upon a time personal, and we had an experience of Him, and we're supposed to go back to Etzol in the end of days, and once again experience Hashem like Yetzias Mitzrayim. But what happened in between? There's this whole universality, which we're talking about now, is that Hashem is impersonal. How is that going to contribute? Here's how. Okay? Here's how it's going to contribute. It's going to be different. So in other words, to say, the Das Hashem, or the Hashem being Toiv, which follows Hashem being Nistar, is a different kind of Hashem being Toiv. We don't have to look at this. Amazing. Anytime we have, let's say, anytime we have a goodness of Hashem that follows the Torah, it's a different flavor. Which is, of course, the idea is starts in Mitzrayim. That Hashem tells Avram Avinu, the revelation of Hashem is going to come after a certain tukuf of suffering. After a certain tukuf of suffering. Famously, the Midrashim say, the Kabbalim say, had Yetzias Mitzrayim run its course till the end, then that would have been done. This doesn't have to keep on happening. We only need one time. This idea that there has to be a tkufa of Hester that then is followed by Gilui, that only has to happen once. But there has to be the right shear of Hester, then the Gilui that comes after the Hester is going to have a certain surah, certain flavor. Okay? And that Gilui is going to be a different Gilui than the Gilui that didn't have that Hester in between.
Is it when we maybe, let's say that as a nation we would view ourselves as contingent?
Right.
Not necessarily.
Right. So we are going to view ourselves, the nation of Israel is going to view themselves as they're going to have this kind of idea that human beings, as awesome as they are contingent.
I mean as a nation too.
What?
As a nation too.
Yeah, probably, you're right.
We wouldn't have to be a nation.
Mm-hmm. I think so too. Yeah, that's probably true.
Ourselves as not a nation.
That's probably true. Too. On a national level, there's going to be our nationhood itself is also going to be. That's probably true too. So what does that do for everyone else? Let's talk about what does that do for the rest of the world. Okay, there's that aspect too. The rest of the world, they're going to discover Hashem at the end of days, but yet we're going to have a special relationship with Hashem. So the question is, so what's our relationship necessary? How does it work with the rest of the world? And how does our going through the stage of interacting with the rest of the world, which is discovering that there's a universe, discovering there's a whole world out there, how does that contribute to the Das Hashem in the future that is going to somehow incorporate all the umas? Okay, that's I want to talk about that aspect here. There's a concept of Shemoneh Esreh. We spoke about one of the shiurim. The Shemoneh Esreh, the idea of Shemoneh Esreh, as Rabbi Avram Bulafia says, if you think that the Malach Gabriel taught Yosef L'Shonis, Tamin Shigoinis. Famous Chazal, Bo Gabriel V'lim Shemoneh Esreh, says Avram Bulafia and others. I found this also in there's a sefer called what's it called? future, we'll see. Anyways, that he says, if you think that the Malach taught from Yosef languages, you're believing Shigonis. Shivim Lashonis means, what it means is there are 70, as we spoke about a few shurim ago, I think, 2 shurim ago maybe, there are 70 types of humans, 70 aspects of the nefesh, as Rabban says in Parashat Baloi, 70 koichs nefesh. And this corresponds to the 70 sarim in heaven, which means 70 ideals, 70 things that people can value. So people can have, there are 70 gods of the nations because each nation has its own experience in the world, and their experience makes them think this is real, this is the most important thing. Let's say we spoke about, one nation says love is what the most important thing, the most real thing. The other one says power, the other one says whatever. And those are the Shivim Sarim, and those come from their own nature, coupled with their experience, and that's their God. Adkan Divrei Rambam. Those are the Shivim Sarim, and those are the Shivim Lashonis are that whenever a person talks, and this is very important, there's really 70 languages. What that means is that there's really 70 languages, what it means is as follows. It means that your nitiyah, how you think about things, is going to determine how you use words. No two people use words the same way. Everyone, there are really different languages. Forget about this, the same word, water. So some people are going to call something water, some people are not going to call, are not going to call it water. The same word. I'm not talking about water, mayim, agua, whatever. Vasa. It's not the point. Water, one word can be used in 70 different ways. Why? Because there's always going to be limit cases. Do we call it water if it's mixed with something else? Well, I don't know. So let's say I think about nutrition, so I'm going to think about whether it's going to
semiotics, by the way, is the name
of
the
semiotics, right? You think about you're very into you're an aesthete. You think about what's called flavor, and you're a foodie. So if it doesn't taste like water, you're not going to say. Well, kids, everyone's going to have their angle. It's an angle, right? Okay, those are the Shivim Lashonis. That's the idea of Shivim Lashonis, and perhaps on some level, I guess you weren't supposed to really figure this out, that the Shivim Lashonis, such as they actually exist in the world, somehow the differences are rooted. Why Taka do the Polish say it this way and they say that way? I say B'dayship because the Polish have a certain tchuna, and that tchuna is mechayev kach v'kach, and so on and so forth. That's the idea of Shivim Lashonis. Okay, now in the future, the Shivim Lashonis and the Shivim Sarim in heaven are going to somehow unite, but not quite. The Shariah talks about this. The Shivim Sarim are going to be, they're not going to be completely out of the picture, but Klal Yisrael is still going to have a special relationship with Hashem, and they're still going to have this Sarim, but somehow they're still going to worship Hashem. So what's going to happen in the future, kids? I'm going to give it to you briefly because I think we should wrap this up. It goes like this. Everyone has their sar, which means everyone has their experience. And since everyone has their experience, every nation has their experience, therefore every nation has their God. In other words, they take their experience as being the most real, right? How can you get out of that? How can the nations be taught that their experiences are not God's? That even though they experience life in a certain way, that's not reality. The true reality, the true God is something beyond their experience, the one true God. How can they be brought to know that? So, they have to learn that what they experience is merely an experience. It's not reality. I think this is called phenomenology, but the idea that there's an experience of phenomena which is not an experience of the essence of the thing in and of itself. So in other words, when the nations make their gods because of their experience, what they're saying is, look, this is what we know, this is what we've experienced. We've experienced love as being most important and most powerful in terms of what happens in this world. We experience power as being the most important. Okay, tell them, yes, you experienced that. But can the world be brought to learn that experience is only an angle, is not the thing itself, is not reality itself? So here's the theory of Klal Yisrael and their role in Gula. When Klal Yisrael is going to reach the point where they know that Gadol and Neira, as in the human being who wants to live, is only there in a contingent way, then they're in the position, that's the nation of Klal Yisrael. The nation of Klal Yisrael is such that their very being, their own personhood, and what they believe, Gadol and Neira is going to work together with Gibar, such that the midas tovos of Gadol and Neira are tempered by Gibar and they have the input of Gibar, which means they're colored by the fact that they're contingent. Klal Yisrael then is in the position to teach the world about the nature of being. because they know that being is contingent. And if you know that being is contingent, then you can teach the 70 nations that yes, you each have your sar, but guess what? All of being is contingent. And once you know all of being is contingent, you can know that each experience that each of the nations has is merely a fraction or a reflection, perhaps a better word, is a reflection of the one true God, which Taka they don't know. They don't know, but he's reflected in their experience. So this basically what I want to wrap this up. Like I said, I'll give you the Torah this year and all the answers. How this has a correspondence in reality, whether in us personally or our nation or in history, and whether this somehow is something we can do or not, that I leave for the shir that we're not going to give. But the teretz of the Kash we started with, is as follows. So the Kash we started with is, the world is going to be, we've experienced universalism. We've come face to face with the fact that there's a whole world out there. How is that going to contribute or work together with a future that's particular, of Klal Yisrael having a special relationship with Hashem? And the answer I submit to you now is that here's how it's going to work. Klal Yisrael is going to have a relationship with Hashem. The nature of their relationship is going to allow them to teach the world, something which in the past they couldn't learn. They couldn't teach. Klal Yisrael in the past, let's say they believed in Gadol and Noira. And Gibor they never spoke about it, because the Nevi'im just ignored it. Let's just pretend it's not there. Let's basically forget about Yitzchak. And that's, by the way, why in the second bracha we talk about the Ne'emon, and Tchias HaMesim is Ne'emon. Ne'emon, it's Emunah. We can't explain it. It's not something that we have, it makes any sense to us. It's something we could just pay lip service to. Which is what the Rambam says, by the way, in the Ikrim. The Ikr of Tchias HaMesim is to believe that there's such a thing called Tchias HaMesim. That's the Ikr. There's such a thing. How, why, what, when, we don't have to know. So it's not something we can know. What we can know is Gadol HaNoira, which means we can know Hashem as a human being. We can know Hashem as a person who does good. They know, everyone else knows Hashem as their gods. Their whatever their aspect of divinity is. Okay? So we all have das. We all have a certain kind of das. Our das is missing Gibor, and their das is even worse. But no one has the true das Hashem. No one has the true das Hashem. Everyone has a certain kind of das, which makes us liable to Avodah Zarah. They're doing Avodah Zarah. We ourselves are liable to Avodah Zarah, because Hashem is a human. Is a human that we think must exist, because we think we must exist. The day will come where we're going to redefine humanity. Us, Am Yisrael, is going to redefine what it means to be human. We're going to know what it means to be human. We're going to know that humans don't have to exist. And then we're going to understand Hashem's humanity as such, as a humanness, which is a gift, which is granted and doesn't have to be so. That kind of anthropomorphism of Hashem doesn't lead us to Avodah Zarah. And this is a point I'm just alluding to. I'll leave it to you, because think about it. It's a different kind of anthropomorphism. It's a human when we understand that a human itself is just sort of mirage, sort of a contingent being. And that Havana is going to allow us to tell the Shivim Amim, who have the Shivim Zarim, that your Shivim Zarim are only reflections of some truth. What do you mean reflections of truth? What do you mean? Isn't truth what we experience? No. Because through learning Mechai Mesim, Baracham Imam, through learning Micha Meicha, we know that all truth is built on a void, basically, on a great void, on a great lack. And therefore we can then use that tfisa. And again, it's not just knowing the philosophy, it's about our essence being that way, that then we can take the amim and incorporate them. So again, so it means we have to have a relationship with Hashem, a very particular personal relationship with Hashem. Go back to Yitzchak, Geula, but this time modified with this input of knowing that of Gibor, because we suffered long enough. People died, and maybe there's Tchias HaMesim. Of course, there's questions when Tchias HaMesim will actually happen. Before you must now you understand it's a real question. It's not just chronology. And the knowledge that comes, the post Tchias HaMesim knowledge, or the post Matei Asurim, knowledge, is a different kind of Das Hashem, and that's the Das Hashem that's necessary to then tell the nations, Okay, you have a certain experience, yes, and Taka, your experience is only that. It's not going to change. You're only going to experience Ava, you're going to experience Koyach, you're only going to experience money, whatever it is. But guess what? We know, and like I said, we know, not just we know philosophically, we know in our being, in our behavior, that experiences are merely on top, a gift, something over something else. And your experience is a reflection of the one true God, which they could unite around. Everyone's unite around. This nation reflects Hashem in such a way, this nation reflects Hashem in such a way, and it's going to stay that way. They'll still reflect Him in such a way. Their anhag is not going to change. But the tfisa of the anhag is going to change through our tfisa. Now, just want to say one last thing, and I'm ending with this. When I say they're going to change through us, it could be it's happening, it could be I'm just telling you something that's happening already. Like we spoke about this in one of the shurim, like, is it important for us to know this? I'm not sure. Now what? Are we going to make this happen? Could be. Maybe talking about it will somehow inspire us to make it happen. But maybe it's just understanding the process. It's sort of happening already.
How does it happen if it's an experience?
How did what happen?
How is it happening now? Why is this moment helpful? We just have to die and come back to life. Really.
No, because it's not just about dying and come back to life. Like a nation could die and come back, like you said, with a nation. I don't know, post-Holocaust, we're a nation that comes from nowhere. You know, it's mate assume.
You don't need Tchias Mesim.
What? No, maybe not. You don't necessarily. There's a lot of things that are giba. Mate assume saying yeah.
And Mashiach would be that.
What?
The actual
That could be
act.
too. Right. But
So
the actual
it's
Tchias
not
Mesim
just the experience of that; it's experiencing it in all different ways.
in all different ways. I think Tchias Mesim is the spitz of that. That's what I said before. That the question of when Tchias Mesim will happen becomes a very interesting question. But Tchias Mesim is the soif of this gilui. But we have it already in any time. So anytime we experience tzaddik rala, and then we go back to tzaddik v'toivloi, basically what I'm telling you is that the tzaddik v'toivloi is now understood differently because it's with the realization. In other words, the first time a guy experienced tzaddik v'toivloi, he woke up, it's tzaddik v'toivloi. Okay, very nice. And then all of a sudden it's tzaddik rala. The next time he had tzaddik v'toivloi, he understands it a little differently. That's all I'm saying. It's really a very basic idea that your understanding of Hashem as being good is going to be different when you realize that Hashem could or could not, if He so chooses. And it's going to make you understand the essence of choice or of brute will, of contingency that underlies everything. And that is a key to remaking the human psyche and remaking the whole world in that image. All right. And this, we leave it.
Why